Many of us get shamed for watching childish content, even though that childish content seems to be the only place where your thoughts and feelings actually make sense. I think everyone that still watches Winx Club can relate to these feelings to a certain extent. I think that's why so many people connect to Bloom. She shows you that you can find your fairy tale if you don't give up and that there's always a way to become happy. I think that makes Bloom such a compelling character in the original show. In her normal life, she has loving parents, but the only people we get introduced to from her social circle are a bunny and a girl that looks down on her. But we can also see that Bloom is not a pushover. She immediately jumps into danger when she sees that someone needs help. It's so nice to see those characteristics be portrayed in the beginning. That's why I think many people are not liking the reboot. Bloom doesn't really seem discontent about her life. Sure, her dad teases her about her interest, but it doesn't bother her at all. Pretty much the only conflict she really faces in the first maybe 2 minutes of the show is her hands flaring up. But even that doesn't spark any curiosity out of her. This version of Bloom feels less active and more reactionary. She didn't even start attacking the troll till he breaks her bike. She's a sweet girl, but there's not that much to say about her. And you can also kind of see this through her design. I do like that they try to give Reboot Bloom a bit more of an artsy look. She looks like an average girl you find at art school. There isn't anything wrong with her, and I like that there's references to her power on her jeans. And she reads as a perfectly sweet girl, which is what she is in the reboot. But in the original, you can immediately see that she's a girl next door type. She's a character you're supposed to relate to, and a character you're supposed to pay attention to. And I think the colors help with that. They make her stand out. They make your eyes immediately go to her in a frame. And Bloom's design really speaks to her character. She doesn't shy away, even though she is really sweet. Before I start going to my reboot, I want to iterate that I'm not hating on the reboot just to hate on new stuff. I'm a fan of the new Percy Jackson series. I'm obsessed with the Little Mermaid live action. And the original She-Ra show and the Netflix reboot both have a special place in my heart. And I think the season 3 of The Legend of Korra is better than any season of the original Avatar. I don't have the initial aversion that many people seem to have for reboots. I love seeing franchises grow and change. That's why I was initially excited for the reboot. But then I watched it and my tune changed a little bit. I was hoping that the creator would delve more into the characters. At least that's what it looked like the original plan was. But when I watched it, I was left really confused. A whole episode was condensed in 5 minutes, and the rest of the episode felt very fast. Characters were getting introduced 15 miles an hour, never leaving us a moment to absorb what was really happening. And then there was Damien, a character that honestly looked completely out of place in the art style for some reason. And then I continued watching the show. Bloom almost takes a back seat, developmentally wise. Of course, we see her the most, but she hardly is curious about the world around her. She's satisfied with everything. The only struggle she truly seems to be afraid of is potentially hurting her friends, which she only came close to when she was hypnotized. The show does nothing to make her seem interesting. Damien, on the other hand, seems to be getting a character arc. He starts off standoffish and sad, and we actually see him struggle with magic, something that's implied to be happening to Bloom, but we don't really see happening. Damien struggles, and we see his relationship dynamic with his father, one that is complicated and interesting. But what is Bloom doing? I think the main issue I take with the reboot is that they somehow made the character seem boring. My version of Bloom begins as a girl who has just finished her final year of high school. Unlike most of her classmates she started high school with, she didn't graduate in a traditional classroom. She completed her final 2 years of high school through homeschooling. People often look down on her because of the way she saw the world. This worried her parents a lot, and Bloom could always tell they were. But if Bloom was going to be honest, she didn't have a plan for the future. She didn't even apply for any colleges or any jobs. She doesn't know who she wants to become or what direction she wants her life to take. She genuinely feels lost until one day everything changes. While going about her usual routine, she saw something she didn't expect to be real. A fairy. A fairy named Stella. She ran away from home and somehow found herself stranded on Earth. Unfortunately, she was also being attacked by a magical creature that should never have been on Earth in the first place. Without fully understanding what was happening, Bloom saves the strange girl. And in that moment, she receives the proof she's been searching for her entire life. Fairies are real, magic is real, and she wasn't crazy for believing there was something more out there. When the creature attacks again, she instinctively stands between the girl and danger. She never knew she possessed magic, and this is the start of a journey filled with adventure, tragedy, self-discovery, and growth. Most importantly, it becomes a story about learning to love yourself despite the voices telling you not to. Bloom's journey is about finding peace in who she is and learning that it's never too late to become the person you want to be. I absolutely have mixed feelings about the original show, especially Bloom. I really love her in her first season, and I think her character in the second season is even more interesting because she struggles with being a leader, especially as the only girl new to the universe. She's struggling to confide in her friends. She's struggling to see what they have in common. And, and I think that's such an interesting way to have a main character interact with the rest of the cast, especially with interpretation that she's getting groomed by people with evil intentions. I think it's a shame that we kind of lose what's interesting about the show, but that's beside the point. I'm talking about my version of Bloom, who's hyperactive and she probably has ADHD. She's a social butterfly, even though she was homeschooled for most of her high school career. And she still somehow is someone who's incredibly open minded and ready to meet new people. At the end of the day, the issue with Bloom wasn't who she was as a person. The issue was that she wasn't appreciated for who she was. I don't know how to frame this part of the video, so I think I'm just going to throw in some fun facts about my version of Bloom. My version of Bloom mostly uses her hands with magic. She finds out really early on that she has an issue with magic when it feels like something that's happening to her instead of something she's actively doing. And so when combat magic comes into play, she learns how to combine a kickboxing fighting style with magic. Part of that comes from her life on Earth. In my version, Bloom took self-defense classes because her parents were concerned about the situation at school, and she ended up channeling a lot of her energy into that, even winning awards. And so it was easy to apply those abilities to her magic. I think it's really interesting to see someone have fire hands while also fighting with them. And I'm also making her more of an artist. I think that Bloom having an active imagination will make her connection to the past so much more interesting. I'm probably actually most definitely not bringing back Domino. I will be bringing back someone who may have lived in Domino, but I'm not gonna tell this yet. That's for the future. As a kid, I think I always assumed that Daphne just sent Bloom to the future, and that's why no one remembers Domino. But even as a kid, I started questioning this at around season 3 because the timeline just didn't make any sense. So even if she was sent into the future, it wouldn't make any sense. But that's besides the point again. I bounced around lots of ideas how I would fix this. And I think in my version of Winx Club, Bloom gets sent into the far, far future and to a completely different planet. This happens because the mother dragon and I'll talk about the Wonder Dragon when I talk about the world building. But I want all these immortal beings to have some kind of stake in the story. I've always found those type of stories really interesting. I want them to be morally gray beings that don't really have a clear good side and bad side. Of course, they will lean towards one than the other, but that's usually because of selfish reasons rather than them serving some greater purpose. We might assume or interpret their action as good or evil. They really don't see themselves as one or the other. And I think that's a really interesting thing to explore, and it could be a topic for identity. If Bloom is the keeper of the dragon flame, what does it say about her? The dragon flame isn't good nor evil, so what is she? As for romance, Bloom will have a huge crush on Brandon, or I mean Sky. I mean she's a normal teenage girl and she sees this handsome blonde guy who looks like a Prince Charming and acts like Prince Charming on the surface. She'll be completely obsessed with him. I also think it's cute how the relationship starts out in the show. They're both awkward, and I think that's important for Bloom's growth. Since the creator seems interested in putting more focus on the boys, I think there are some really fun opportunities, which, if handled a little bit different, they could be great. I love when Bloom has an attitude because I think it's important to show that you can have a backbone but also being really sweet and really nice. And now it's the part where I talk about the redesign. I want Bloom to feel like a dreamer. And this is most obvious in the details that she has a collection of stars on her pants. This serves a story purpose and of course a personal purpose. The stars show a connection to a world beyond Earth, and they hint at cosmic origins she will eventually discover on the core level. They also symbolize the first thing that opened her eyes to a bigger universe. Before magic was real, she was already looking up at the stars, imagining what might exist beyond them. Her color palette is built around blue and yellow. Part of this decision is practical. The colors help her red hair stand out immediately, making her really recognizable from a distance. But the colors also communicate who she is as a person. Blue represents trustworthiness, intelligence, loyalty, and calmness. Yellow represents hope, optimism, creativity, and energy. So if you mix them together, you get someone who's adventurous, kind, and imaginative. And naturally, it draws attention, and that's exactly who she is. She enjoys being around people, and she loves sharing her passions. I also added smaller details to communicate her personality a little bit. I have clips in her hair to prevent it from falling into her eyes, and I also have an elastic around her wrist to show that she's always ready to focus on a task. These details may seem small, but I really wanted to add them because I thought they captured more of her personality. And for her fairy form, my inspirations were superheroes and magical girls, specifically characters like Wonder Woman and Sailor Moon. I link both of these characters directly to Bloom because they both live in a more secretive civilization or used to live in a secretive civilization. In her transformation, her hair becomes larger and brighter and more flame-like, so her magic is physically overflowing from her body. And I always feel like larger hair symbolizes an increased confidence or greater power. It's like her personality is taking up more space. I also think it's important that both versions of Bloom look like Bloom. I think it's important that you can physically see their growth with every transformation without them losing a part of who they are when they aren't transformed.
One of the bigger changes I'm making in my Winx Club rewrite is how I approach magic. I felt like in the original show, magic was really vague for each character and how they can use it, except for maybe an Aisha and a Flora who have specific elemental magic. But even then, it felt more freestyled, and at some point, it became just magic beams. So I want to make it more personal to each of the girls. I wanted them to have special magic that came most naturally to them, that correlated to their personality. And of course, everyone can learn additional spells and develop other abilities, but I wanted it to be an extension of who they are. Because of that, Althea became a place much bigger than in the original show. I always thought it was a shame that in the original there was this beautiful magical school filled with interesting characters, and we rarely got to see it after the first half of season 1. And so I wanted Althea to be a place where the students can actually struggle and learn and discover who they are, and it actually being a home. Kind of like how Camp Half-Blood feels in the Percy Jackson books. Especially during the first season, I think having this school will make them feel more grounded. And as we move away from Althea, we can slowly have this feeling of them actually growing up. Rather than immediately having their first fairy transformation, I want it to be something you earn and you have to actually study for. And I also think it will probably be a first year trial of this to see how strong you are, to see if you could actually pass or not, with exceptions maybe. I still have to flesh that one out. And of course, some students achieve it faster than the others. And I also don't think having your fairy transformation first or later makes you stronger. It just means that you're maybe a little bit less connected with who you are as a person. I'll talk a lot more about the other girls, their transformations, in their videos. I want this rewrite to appeal to an older audience. Winx Club was incredibly successful when it first released. But the entertainment industry has changed dramatically over the last 20 years. But I think that Winx Club could thrive as a more mature show. For example, think about all the indie animations that are getting really popular right now, like Has-Been Hotel or The Amazing Digital Circus. Of course, I don't think the Winx Club girls should be cursing every other sentence, but that's besides the point. Also, this is one of the reasons why I aged up the characters a little bit in my version. Everyone is over the age of 18. This allows me to explore more mature themes, relationships, and personal struggles in a way that feels appropriate for the story. I'm changing certain friendships, rivalries, and romantic relationships to fit my story a little bit better. Adaptations, rewrites, or reworks are not here to replace original stories. They're meant to explore different possibilities. So I'm currently writing out the entire story from beginning to end. All the character analysis and design videos are going to be first. I plan to create a full series based on my rewrite. I'm still thinking and figuring out how exactly the format would look like. Maybe it'll be a narrated audiobook, or maybe it will be an animatic style series format. Or maybe it'll be closer to an audio story. I'm still exploring the possibilities for now, though I want to introduce you to my version of Bloom first. A girl who spent her entire life believing there was something more out there. The girl who refused to stop dreaming, and a girl whose journey only just began. I hope this video is giving you a clear view on the world I'm creating, and I hope it makes you excited to see what's next. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again when we talk about the next member of the Winx.